Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this special episode, I'm helping retailer Harry Rosen set the tone with a new online webinar series which invites Canadian thought leaders and role models to chat about current events, their passions, and how they set the tone for their personal and professional lives. In this first episode of the series, Larry Rosen, Chairman and CEO of Harry Rosen, and top executive coach Jane Gaynor are introduced by series host Trinh Tham, CMO for Harry Rosen, and talk to me about leadership in the COVID era. Next, I welcome back to the podcast Eric Morris, Managing Director for Retail for Google Canada. We catch up and talk about the latest fascinating fresh insights from Google based on search data on how Canadian consumers are shopping and getting ready for holiday 2020. But first, let's listen into Set the Tone with Larry Rosen and Jane Gaynor.
Hello, and thank you all for joining us for the first episode of the Set the Tone webinar series presented by Harry Rosen. My name is Trinh Tham, Chief Marketing Officer and SVP of Marketing and E-commerce at Harry Rosen. I will be your MC for our debut episode on setting the tone for leadership. We started this as a way to gain new perspectives from key Canadian thought leaders and role models on current events, their passions, and how they set the tone for their personal and professional lives. We have an exciting session planned for you today, hosted by Michael LeBlanc, the producer and host of 3 podcasts, The Voice of Retail, The Remarkable Retail, and The Food Professor. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to our talented host, Michael LeBlanc, to dive into our first conversation of the day.
Well, thanks so much, Trinh. It's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from across Canada. You know, I couldn't think of a better way to kick off for this first episode, setting the tone for leadership, than with one of Canada's top business leaders who himself is making his and leading his organization through tremendous change, and one of Canada's top executive coaches who is specialized in helping senior executives across Canada deal with change and managing through leadership. So welcome, Larry Rosen and Jane Gaynor. Welcome. So let's jump right in. Harry Rosen, one of Canada's first leading luxury menswear retailers, known today for providing a personalized and outstanding customer experience, and known around the world as one of the top specialty menswear stores. Founded in 1954 by Harry Rosen himself, the store has grown from a single 500 square foot store in Toronto to become a powerhouse in Canadian retail, with 15 stores, 2 Zenga boutiques, and a robust, recently replatformed e-commerce offering. Larry Rosen joined the business in 1985, is currently chairman and CEO. Larry, first question to you. How's your dad?
Hi, Michael. Good afternoon. My dad's great, actually. He's 89 this year. He's in fine form. Still remembers to tell me what I'm doing wrong. But he's great. He's just great. And I'm sure he would rather be doing this than if he could.
Well, you know, and the family tradition continues, right? Your son Ian is working with Trinh to lead your e-commerce efforts, which are so important. We're going to get to talking about that a little later in our episode.
Very proud about having G2. Actually, let me just give you a touch of background of our organization. You mentioned Harry. Well, in 1954, Harry and his brother Lou started our organization with $500 and a 500 square foot store on Parliament Street in Cabbagetown in Toronto. You know, like real entrepreneurs, they willed a business into existence. That's the great thing about entrepreneurism. They learned about each client. They studied each client. They kept records on each client. Now everybody calls that CRM. Those days, They didn't have a name for it. They just did it. And they asked for recommendations. My dad, in about 1956, which was the year I was born, he went down to Madison Avenue and he bought a natural shouldered garment, which was popular on Madison Avenue at that time. I don't know if you've seen the show Mad Men. And he brought that back to Canada. And he went to, it's called Copley Apparel now, but it was Cambridge then. And he asked them to make that garment. And that became the biggest hit in Toronto for younger execs. They all sort of flocked over to this out-of-the-way place on Parliament Street to get the Harry Rosen look. Anyways, now it's 66 years later. We are Canada's leading menswear retailer. We have 17 stores. And we like to say that our purpose, our corporate purpose, is to make men feel good and in turn look good. When we believe that when men in their professional and personal lives look and feel better, they do better. And that's what our raison d'etre is.
So that's your brand purpose. Let's talk about the retail industry a little bit. Let's talk about the before time, prior to COVID. Retail was undergoing tremendous transition. It was not an industry for the, you've got 60 years plus, close to 60 years of being in the retail industry. It was tremendous change were happening. Tell us a little bit about the landscape as you entered in, as you saw it in 2019 and as you saw it beginning in 2020.
Yeah, COVID, it's interesting. I'll talk about the impact of COVID, but there were some very profound changes happening in our sector and in retail in general. The first thing was, in our sector, younger men were having a much, much more significant influence on the market as a whole. The boomers, which are men basically 54 to 74, although they had lots of money, they weren't spending like they used to, and they were becoming less relevant. And it's really the punching, making things happen was really the millennial generation. Sort of coupled with that trend, there was a long-term trend towards casualization of dress for work. And that's not to say that men didn't enjoy dressing up for special occasions or for important meetings, but generally speaking, the younger men were demanding a more casual workplace. The other thing, of course, the other third trend that we were very strongly was every year the online part of buying was becoming more and more and more. Not only were they men buying more online, but they were getting more of their information digitally. All it was a black swan event. It's the most significant economic event of my lifetime. But what it really did was it took these three trends that everybody was talking. We have a 3 to 5 year horizon to adapt them, and it forced us to adapt today. You had to pivot. You had to be resilient. You had to change your business strategy to anticipate the acceleration of these trends today. And so that's what we did. I mean, we immediately added tons and tons. I mean, we were adding sports for options, but we found it imperative that we add tons of them now. And we did. We went out and sought a lot of new sportswear options. We felt it was critical that we rebrand our brand to speak to the younger millennial guy. And I don't know if you've seen our Set the Tone ads. They're on all the sports channels, but they're clearly not aimed. They're aimed at a younger man and speaking to a younger generation of men. And of course, we have all our investments have shifted from bricks and mortar to supporting the digital experience. We've just migrated to a brand new state-of-the-art online platform. We've been investing heavily in logistics to ensure that goods get out on e-commerce. And we've been really working hard on integrating our client and advisor experience through all the digital touch points. So those are some of the changes that sort of we had to accelerate and pivot to make sure we dealt with this pandemic era.
Yeah, it's really been termed as the Great Acceleration. And nested in that is trends that were already happening, just kind of moved forward a couple of years. So I like your description of this intersection between stores and retail. And the important thing is, as you said, stores aren't going anywhere, but their role's probably going to change with this intersection of online. So it's, trying to do these three things at the same time, figure out the role of stores, some of which is the traditional, some of which is, as a media, how do I tell people all about our brand? I mean, there's nothing beating these great flagship stores from a visual and from a set point, executing online and then adjusting to fashion trends, which kind of ebb and flow and right now are up in air. I just did an interview with Roger Martin from Top Global Strategist, and he has this interesting concept of habits as decaying assets. In other words, consumer habits pre-COVID are now changing, and it sounds like you're reacting as fast as you can and setting the tone for getting in and aligning with these trends and what could be new customer habits.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be a place for a store. People still want to touch, feel, try on, have altered. But today's man's different. I mean, I know that period, that pandemic period, a lot of our customers, our regular customers, were concerned about going out, and they bought online from us for the first time. And they liked it. they enjoyed the experience. And I see them in the stores. I see them. I hear from them. I get emails, and they're saying to me that they really are enjoying that. And I'm sure now a large portion or a portion of their online buying is going to be from us online as opposed to purely in the store.
Right. It's really a transformation, as one of my other partners, Steve Dennis, talks about silos over farms. Right. There's no, from your business perspective, it's not the online store or the physical store. It's really the merging of the two. I wanted to transition to talk about leadership a bit. I follow you on Instagram. You posted a picture, I think it was in April or early May, and it was really a startling picture to me. It was you in a darkened Yorkdale shopping center in Toronto in front of a darkened Harry Rosen store that was closed. What was going through your mind as a business leader in that picture? As I looked through that and as I tried to think, what was going through your mind at that time? It's not like Harry Rosen hasn't been through ups and downs in the economy and challenges, nothing quite to this extent, but take me back to those days. What were you thinking and what were you thinking was coming next?
Well, I mean, first of all, no one's ever seen a period where stores, we've had stores closed for an ice storm or for a critical event, but nobody's seen a period where stores are right across the country are 100% closed. And you have to, we got people that need to earn livings. And it was just, the first thing was, it was shock. But then I remembered that, hey, people are looking to me. So I said, I realized, hey, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been through, in 66 years, we've been through a lot of ups and downs. And I realized that we had to be proactive and dynamic. And the most important thing is that even though at that time, I'm like a deer in the headlight, I can't look like a deer in the headlight. And when people are looking at you and all the leaders in our organization, we have terrific leadership. We made this clear, we talked about this extensively, that they have to see that, that confidence that we're going to get through this. And we were proactive, we were dynamic, and we really, really made sure that we took care of our people first, and we took care of our clients. That, not for sure, making sure that we took care of their health and safety, but also that we took care of their minds and that we supported them the best we could. We set up regular communications with our people and regular communications with our clients and explained all the ways in which we could support them and service them. And our HR department was probably putting out a communication every day. We also, at that time, we realized that we had to communicate differently to customers. So we completely pivoted our marketing. We changed it completely. We went 100% focused on driving our online. And actually, it was shocking. Our online during that period grew, was up 400%. Now, wow. It was, it was incredible. And in fact, the system, we hadn't moved to our new platform, and it was tough. Our customer service and online were getting swamped. We had an old jalopy of an e-commerce system that before we moved to our new state-of-the-art system, and it was really struggling. But we did it. We made it through, and we serviced a lot of orders. And if there's anything that's sort of symbolic of this era, it's that what we call CapEx, or our investments. Everything has shifted completely away from bricks and mortars to investments in digital experience. That's all that we're doing, whether it's the website or other things that support logistics for the digital experience. Sure. That's where all the investment's being made.
I think it's particularly poignant with your name on the building when you think about that leadership, right? I think that must strike you as well. Knowing what you now know and being what you've been through, what's your advice for leaders and the folks listening today about how to continue to lead during the COVID era? We're not out of this yet. We could be one way, shape, or another in what I call the COVID era for quite a bit of time. Learning what you have learned, and what's your advice?
Well, I'm reading a book called The Splendid and the Vile about Winston Churchill during the Battle of Britain. And, what he did was brilliant. He acknowledged the difficulty of the situation. He never denied that things were tough, but then he gave people reasons to hope. I think that's what leadership has to do in this type time. I mean, we can't deny that COVID is not having a dramatic impact on how many people are coming out to stores and malls and stuff. But we can identify the opportunities. I mean, we've got this great initiative. We call it trunk club selling, where people are sending packages of things with permission, of course. And clients are responding very positively to items chosen for them and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's lots of new ideas and initiatives being undertaken, and you got to keep highlighting them. And even if you're scared, it's okay to be scared, but you got to remember that you're the calming influence for all the people around you, and you better fake it if you have to.
Well, as the CEO of one of Canada's leading brands, how are you setting the tone day to day today? I mean, this time of year for retailers is always hectic. We're heading into holiday, which is a big time in any year. As you think about now and moving forward, how are you setting the tone on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, firstly, I am adhering to all the PPE requirements and everything. I'm not violating them in the least, and I'm insisting that our organization does that. And that we're treating the situation with great seriousness. But I'm also getting out to the stores and talking to our people. We're sending out every week. We're sending out important updates on what's happening, and we're asking them for ideas. Actually, it's quite remarkable. If you ask people and you say, what are you doing that's really working and that's connecting with your clients? Our associates are just well springs of great ideas. And, you'd be shocked. I mean, we're all sitting there in a room as senior people trying to find the answers. Sometimes the answer's on the front line,
Sure. Right out in the front. Well, Larry, this has been a great exploration. I want to bring on Jane Gaynor and talk about leadership. Jane, thanks again for joining us so much. Welcome to our series. I want to tell everyone a little bit about you. Jane is an experienced executive coach who supports, challenges, and guides her clients to achieve their professional goals and their personal goals. Her focus is helping executives and organizations successfully navigate change. I can't imagine a better person. I can't imagine any more change that's going to happen, but 2020 isn't done yet. While being their confident, authentic self, 20 years of extensive corporate experience, a decade of coaching practice in diverse industries, a wealth of practical knowledge, expertise to your coaching, serves executive coach for the MBA program at Queen's University and consultant for the Queen's Executive Program. You can learn more about Jane and her practice at gainyouredgecoaching.com. Jane, you've been listening and had the opportunity to listen to Larry and I chatting and Larry's leadership style. Reflect on what you've heard and are you hearing similar things from the leaders that you're talking to? And what are you hearing in your practice that kind of resonates perhaps with the conversation that Larry and I have been having?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Harry Rosen for having me. Whenever I get invited to talk about leadership, I get really excited because it's a really important topic, especially right now. So I took lots of notes while the conversation was going on. It's always a pleasure to hear Larry talk about leadership because, again, he's been around for years and has seen many things. So he talked about a couple of key points. Larry and I may use some different language when we talk about leadership, but what I was hearing, it's about the fundamental characteristics of authentic leadership. And there's a real drive on getting back to basics right now.
Well, let's unwrap that a little bit. Talk about your tradecraft as an executive coach. I mean, what is it and how do you approach your work and what's your starting point? You talked about using different terms, but anchor us in kind of your approach, both the words you use, but also fundamentally your beliefs and how you approach that.
Yeah. So my premise is authentic leadership. And I think a lot of people use the term authentic leadership and it might mean different things to different people. So what I mean by authentic leadership, it's really about values-based leadership. And you and I have had this conversation before that I believe you are who you are based on your values and based on the experiences that you've had. Your values act as your navigation system to really define your authentic leadership. And when you live your values consistently, it's what you become known as.
Thinking about the COVID era, Larry and I talked about the before time trends that were already happening and then this great acceleration that COVID has brought to us for the pandemic era. Has it changed your approach at all, or is it still anchored in that kind of authenticity and in those months, I asked Larry what his thoughts were in April. In those months, as you transitioned from the before time into COVID, did your practice change? Were the conversations different? I mean, the way we all work is certainly different, and leadership has to be a bit different. We're leading like this more often than we're leading in person. So talk about that a little bit.
So the one thing that is consistent is, I'm going to say, authentic leadership or values-based leadership is even more important right now. So as people are experiencing challenge and change, it is so important to be grounded in your values. So one of the first exercises that I do with my clients is I have them build their values operating system. And there's lots of different programs out there. I use a system called Pursuit Values Operating System. And what I love about this is that not only do you choose your values, you actually get to define them. So you define what each value means to you. And when we put them together, for example, you and I may both choose the word integrity, but how you and I define integrity could be very different. So being aware of your values, it allows you to guide yourself through that to be more consistent. And I always say, when things are going well, typically your values are being honored. If you are triggered, or that's a common word too, if your things aren't going the way you want, you can get triggered and be stuck. Your values can actually help you self-resource yourself to become unstuck. And so it's a lot of work. I'm going to say even more important on authentic leadership. So that's been consistent. I'm going to say even more important for people to really know who they are and to show up consistently to manage through these challenging times. And as you alluded to, the biggest change, I think I've had to pivot and be accessible in a different way. So one-on-one coaching, it's still common to be via phone or via video. But what I've had to do is add a different platform to my offerings. So I now have virtual workshops. So for example, the last Monday of every month, it's a different topic. And this month was perspective. And other months, it might be resiliency or authentic leadership. And so this once a month gives people and leaders an opportunity to come together and to have some fun and to learn and to grow together. So I would say that's the biggest change, is how we are connecting with other people.
And I guess let me follow that thread for a bit, because Larry certainly alluded to it, is communications, right? So then not only, I think, have the degree of communications become more important, but also the nature of that communications and the media itself. So we're communicating now in this media more often. It's great to hear Larry visiting stores, but it's that kind of thing that you probably aren't doing as much as you did before. And for executives that you talk to who are trying to lead by Zoom, so to speak, that must be a very startling change. And I wanted you to talk about that in the intersection of confidence. So, one of the things that Larry mentioned was, I may not be I'm paraphrasing a bit, I may not be entirely confident of what's going on or what the future is going to look like, who can be in such times, but I need to exude it, or I need to frame my discussions like that, because there's a lot of people looking to the leaders that you coach, to say, well, I want to take my tone from them, because if they're concerned, maybe I should be more concerned. So when you talk to the leaders that you talk to, it's really kind of is it a training of them on how to lead in this very different medium and somehow draw upon what you were just describing to create that confidence?
Yeah, and confidence is a key word. I'm going to even step back. So when we talk about authentic leadership or values-based leadership, it all starts with awareness. So awareness of yourself and awareness of other people. And then perspective comes into it. And when you can be very aware and have that clarity and be aware of your perspective as well as others, there's a different calm confidence that comes. And so if we talk about perspective, for example, step one is, how aware are you of your perspective? The other thing is, how willing and able are you to see someone else's perspective? And so a common image that's used is the number 6. If I were standing here and 6 was on the ground, I would see the number 6. If you are facing it, you would see the number 9. We are both looking at the same image, but seeing it slightly differently. And so as leaders, you come and you see things from your perspective. How willing are you to see something from somebody else's perspective? And to your point, the world has changed. People are working from home. And as much as this is a global pandemic, it has affected all of us very, very differently. And a word I continue to hear is exhausted. We are exhausted for so many reasons. And then think about it, this virtual world, it's exhausting. We're not used to being on camera all the time. That in itself is exhausting. So some things that a lot of my leaders are implementing, it's called the 50-minute meeting, because you need that 10-minute break. You need to be able to log out and take a little break, grab a drink, grab a snack, check on your kids that are doing homework, and then you dial back in for that next one starting at the hour. So these 50-minute meetings is something that has been implemented by a lot of people I'm working with, and they find that it's again, seeing it from your perspective, also understanding what your people need. And as Larry said, your people are your greatest resources. So how do we set them up for success? And sometimes, again, it's those small things that can mean so much.
I had to laugh because one of the top benefits of Zoom, the free version, was that meetings were limited to 40 minutes. So there's a lot of memes and threads about, my God, I love Zoom, because meetings they stop no matter what's going on at 40 minutes. Let me wrap up with a question. Let me frame the question in this way. Based on what you know, based on your practice, based on what we expect the unexpected, 2 starts and 1 stop. So for the leaders out there, 2 things that they should start doing if they're not doing today, again, based on your observations, your practice, listening to great leaders like Larry Rosen, and 1 thing they should probably stop doing. Maybe they're not doing it today. Maybe it's something they used to do. Maybe it's a habit that needs to change. Give me an idea. 2 starts, 1 stop.
Okay. I'm going to start with the starts. 2 starts. The first one I'm going to lead with it's a simple one again. It's be kind. To your point, 2020 has been a year like no other. And I'm going to say, offer kindness to other people. In addition, be kind to yourself. And there's a common conversation, and it's happening more and more with my clients, is this importance of self-care and reminding yourself that self-care is not selfish. If you are not well, you can't take care of other people, be that personally or professionally.
Put your, like the airlines say, right? Your oxygen mask first.
Correct. So I'm going to say be kind I'm going to say the first fundamental. And the other one I'm going to build on one of Larry's comments. And again, hearing this from my clients, is this opportunity to be the calm. People are looking to the leaders to set the tone. And so if you can show up with calmness, that builds calmness. Everything right now is being amplified. So if there's panic, somebody else becomes panic. If there's stress, there becomes more stress. So if we're going to amplify something, how about we amplify being kind? And how about we amplify being calm?
Fantastic. Okay, Now the harder one. Something that the executives should stop doing. I don't know, maybe that's not hard. Maybe there's a long list that you that you approach with, but just give me one. One of your top ones.
I'm going to say stop making assumptions. So think about the last time you made an assumption and it wasn't true. That's a lot of wasted energy and wasted time when you could have dedicated all of that time and resources to something that could have been more meaningful and more productive. So this, when we have assumptions of ourselves or of others, that also comes with expectations. And then with expectation comes judgment. So I'm going to say it just kind of snowballs. And if I can say anything about judgment just separates us. It separates us from ourselves. It separates us from others. And that's really not our intention right now. If there's anything, we want to feel more connected. We want to feel valued. If we think about people in general, we want to feel valued, we want to feel heard, and we want to feel appreciated. And so what we do matters, and setting the tone is a wonderful, I love the title of this. And like I said, I was so excited when you invited me to come on here, because these are all really important keys for authentic leadership.
Well, Jane, thanks so much for the discussion, your great insights. And again, for everyone, you can learn more about Jane and her practice at GainYourEdgeCoaching.com. So thank you again, Jane. Larry, back to you. You've had the chance to listen to Jane, and a lot of the things she said, they felt familiar to me, like they were reflected in your personal style. Is it when you lead again on a day-to-day basis, when you set the tone in your organization, how do you bring that calmness when all things are moving around you and things are so unpredictable? How do you bring that calmness that Jane describes?
Well, firstly, there's drugs. No, I'm just kidding. No, listen, we're blessed in that we have the financial strength to weather the storm. We have a clean balance sheet, and we have the runway necessary to make it through what is clearly an unprecedented situation. But I really like what Jane said. I mean, the essence of it is recognize that people are your greatest assets. Be diligent about clearly communicating your intentions, your plans, and empower your people, empower your leaders, and don't deny there's challenges. But you, as I like it, you set the tone, which is our advertising slogan, but you set the tone with confidence, and you show resilience, and you adapt and evolve, and you pivot. Those are the things that you have to do. And all the people you work with, all the other leaders, you encourage them to do that. You encourage them to listen to the people, listen to the customers. Keep asking our people how they're feeling. What are their needs during this time? And I love that analogy of the 6 and 9, because we do all see things differently. We're assuming that they're feeling okay or they're getting through this, but right. Often they need to hear from you. So those are the types of thoughts that our leadership team were thinking about as we implemented the changes and pivoted during this time.
Well, I can tell you, I was in your Square One store on Friday, and I was so impressed by your people, because I think retail is about people, and they're an upbeat group of professionals, and they were taking care of customers in the new way, in whatever this new way is: full PPE, full masks, no handshakes, but a kind of a touch on the elbow. But yet through all that, there was a personal connection that I've always known and come to expect from shopping at Harry Rosen. It's a bit different, but it's still there. There's a confidence in everything that I saw and everything they were doing. So congratulations on you and your leadership style. It's a great experience.
First of all, I have a great team around me, so it's not just me. It's far from only being me. And that Square One team makes me very proud. They're really great ambassadors for our organization. So thank you for that feedback.
Before I hand it back to Trinh, I wanted to thank our friends at Eaton for helping me set the tone with this great shirt, this great fashion. It's one of many that I own in my closet, so I'm thrilled to be able to wear it today. And again, help me set the tone. So with that, Trinh, back to you.
Well, thank you, Michael. And thank you to our speakers, Jane and Larry. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your leadership experiences with us during such an unprecedented time for business and business leaders alike. Thank you to all of our guests for taking the time to be such a wonderful audience. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. You can join Michael and I for future discussions with key thought leaders throughout the fall and winter season on how they're setting the tone for various topics. And this episode and all episodes will be posted on harryrosen.com for later viewing. So please share with your friends. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at our handle, Harry Rosen Inc., and as well on LinkedIn to hear more about future episodes. So thank you again, everyone, and be very well. That's a wrap. Thank you. Goodbye.
Eric, welcome back to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me again. Nice to hear you.
Well, it's wonderful to hear your voice. I mean, last time you and I was thinking just before we jumped on mic, last time you and I were in person was in the studio room at the Spoke Club in Toronto.
That's right.
Which no longer exists. That's Spoke is gone, and the club is, I don't know what it is now. It's kind of in the netherworld, but it's great to be able to use this technology and catch up. So for the folks who haven't had or didn't have the chance to listen to that interview, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, they should listen to it because it's great, like all of your episodes. But sure, happy to introduce myself. I'm Eric Morris. I'm the managing director and head of our retail practice at Google Canada. As crazy as it sounds, I've been at Google for about 18 and a half years.
Wow.
And have been running our retail business for the last 4. The headlines, I work with the largest grocers, big box and omni-channel retailers like a Walmart, Home Depot, Canadian Tire, et cetera. The online only or e-commerce only businesses in Canada. So think like Clearly in Vancouver, Essence, the luxury retailer in Montreal. We also work with the direct-to-consumer retailers and brands like Lululemon and Canada Goose. And lastly, we also support the technology players behind the retail industry. So I think Shopify, of course, is probably the best example there. So that's sort of our retail ecosystem. And, at the highest level, we share with those retailers consumer insights and trends and help them connect all of that to the products that we offer, like search ads and YouTube and Google Analytics, to help retailers drive sales online, sales in store, and ultimately build their brands and businesses.
Well, last time we spoke, we talked about these big trends, and as has been described often, this great acceleration has happened with the pandemic, and I have to think that you guys have had a front row seat to all that, and I really appreciate you coming on because I want to talk about what you're seeing with consumers, and you got some great research to share today on Holiday Insights, and then I want to spend a bit of time on what you're hearing from those executives, from that level of executives, about their experiences. So why don't we start out with these Holiday Insights? So you get some Holiday Insights that I want to unpack with you. I'm just looking through the document. I'll put a link to these insights in the show notes, so anyone who's listening that wants to go look at them and go a little bit deeper. So as always, some great insights, because you just got this. You're the zeitgeist of what people are looking for, which is wonderful. Like, my quick observation from the Holiday Insights are that consumers are kind of getting I better shop earlier than before message. And in general, what we've called this great acceleration of, a big shift to online, a big move to online has accelerated people's planning and thinking. So take us through kind of the top notes of the research that helped validate that.
I think zeitgeist is actually a great word to describe, where we are in the market, where between Google and YouTube, we're the first place Canadians go, before they buy anything. And holiday, which we know is a really important shopping season, both for consumers and for retailers, we're the number one destination Canadians go before buying anything. So I do think we have a unique perspective here on what Canadians are interested in, what they're doing, and of course, how retailers should respond. I'll walk through them very quickly. It's great that you can post the document. So, we've pointed to 5 trends, in advance of this holiday shopping season. The first is we describe, Canada's e-commerce moment is now. And so there's been a tectonic shift in how Canadians shop and buying online specifically. During the peak, historically, e-commerce probably grew in Canada at about 20% each year. I mean, there were retailers that did better than that. Some did worse than that, but that was the average. During the peak of the pandemic, it was probably, close to 200% growth versus a year ago. Tapered off, but was still doubled in the summer. We believe, based on our data here, that e-commerce will grow at least double from what it was a year ago during this holiday season. Canadians have said, we've commissioned some research in the market. 60% of Canadians say they'll shop more online this season. And as it relates to stores, probably about a third of Canadians who normally shop in store on Black Friday say they'll migrate that shopping specifically online. So Canada's e-commerce moment is now. The rapid acceleration. Shopping online isn't new.
Right. And the growth isn't new, right? I mean, 20% is nothing to sneeze at, right? So
it's nothing to sneeze at.
It was already growing. 20%, considering overall core retail is growing like a couple of percentage. This shift was already happening, right? I mean, and I want to get to this a little bit later because I want to hear each of these 5. But one of the $1 billion question, and I want to get your kind of perspective on it, is how much of this actually sticks. In other words, what consumer habits stick with us and what kind of recede backwards to whatever waterline they're going to set it. Okay, so number 1, Canada's e-commerce moment is now. It's funny, you and I have been, in or around this for 18, 20 plus years. And we've been, woohoo! I'm sad that it kind of took a global pandemic to kind of accelerate it, but it does seem to have really lit a fire. So what's number 2?
Number 2 is Canadians are shopping earlier than ever. And I think that has been informed by the shopping experience that many Canadians experienced early on in this pandemic, some of which continues to this day. It's really hard to get all of the products that you want. I think Canadians are nervous about potential shipping delays if they order things online or items being out of stock. So, interestingly enough, we've seen a 200% increase in, the query Christmas gifts for her. I mean, it's just one type of search, but I mean, it's September, October. It's really interesting that Canadians already looking.
When was this study done? So we're talking about it today. We're in early October. Well, when did you actually have this in field? When were you pulling that data?
That data was as of last week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Very current, but still gifts for her in October. It's in beginning of October?
Beginning of October.
Usually guys aren't thinking about that.
Yeah, I've often been the guy running around the mall the day before a birthday or
my wife's listening. I've been thinking about it since January, but whatever.
Of course you have. And our research shows 22% of Canadians have already started their shopping. Why they're doing this, again, it's concerned about things being out of stock, shopping early to avoid crowds, right? 2/3 of
and lines and the lines that come with them, right?
Yeah, the lines that come with it. Mother's Day was really interesting because I think that's really and back to school. I mean, I think those are two really fresh, important retail moments. But what we observed with Mother's Day, when you look at queries on Google, in the aggregate in Canada. Shopping for Mother's Day began much, much earlier than years past. And I think that's for probably some obvious reasons, like, hey, we really want to treat mom this year more than other years. We're worried things may not be in stock. So we saw searches start days and weeks earlier. And the peak probably wasn't as big, I think, in the case of Mother's Day because people had started shopping so much sooner. Back to school has been a little bit different. Similarly, people started back to school shopping earlier. They were looking for different things. So like, tie-dyed shirts were really, on trend, masks and other items related to safety for students and for teachers, of course, surged. But back to school was interesting because demand didn't taper off like it normally does, call it that first or second week of September. As students gradually started coming back to school and their needs became clearer, we saw sort of shopping spill over into the second, third, even fourth week of September. So, I liken a lot of these trends. It's a bell curve. And so what we've seen is that like bell curve stretch, right? In Mother's Day, it's stretched on one end. With back to school, it's sort of stretched on both ends, both before and after. And the peaks can be, in case of Mother's Day was a little lower, but, back to school, it's just as high. Holiday, we think, will be similar.
I talked to a number of retailers about their back to school experience, and it reflects exactly what you said, that it was the season that was just very elongated, right? So I think it's interesting. We'll see Stats Canada numbers for September, and people will be a bit shocked, actually. So we're going to be in Retail Council of Canada talking about, you're going to see year over year numbers that are going to go, oh my God, it fell off a cliff. When really what happened is it transferred. I think my general sense from the merchants is back to school is fine this year. Is very different, as you described, different characteristics, but it came together. But it just came together by the end of September, right?
Yeah, it's an industry that's driven by comps. But I think this year more than other years, you can't look at the comps for a given day or a weekend or even a week. You need to look at the entire period. Right. And holiday will be very similar. So, our e-commerce moment is now. Canadians are shopping earlier than ever. The third trend that we wanted to highlight is the changing role in the store. And I think, again, that's driven by social distancing. It's driven by, items that may or may not be in stock. I think historically we've thought of Canadians buying in one of two ways, in-store or online. I think the pandemic has really created a third viable way to shop, and that's curbside pickup. It's the combination of the two. And so many Canadian retailers, Canadian Tire is a great example, but there are others who really accelerated their curbside pickup plans during the pandemic and have seen rapid adoption. And again, it's a combination of the two channels, right? You're using online, you're placing an order online, but you're picking up in store. It's great for consumers because it's convenient. You don't have to worry about delays. And it's great for the retailer because they can leverage their store network. And I think for any retailer that's trying to compete against large global marketplaces who are very good at getting little boxes to your door in a day, It's even better if I can pick up an item, within 15 minutes at my local.
And am I reading this right, or is it sound like the CFOs I've talked to look at their spreadsheets and shake their head? 3,000% increase year over year in searches for curbside pickup. Am I reading that right?
Well, you are. It's on a much, much smaller base. I mean, this is new behavior. Like sourdough bread and all sorts of other things that people are.
That's a crazy thing.
Doing.
Try and get a heater or a chest freezer these days. Yeah,
chest freezer. Yeah. Yeah. And, other interesting things, increase in searches for small business up 150% versus last year. Made in Canada searches have actually never been higher. And so stores are interesting because I think it plays to convenience, but also I think there's this sense of patriotism and loyalty and supporting the community. And I think many of us experience this with restaurants where we're buying gift cards to restaurants, even if we couldn't dine there. Early on, we wanted to support them. And I think everyone wants stores to be vibrant and survive in their community. And so sometimes, all other things being equal, if there's a way I can support a local retailer, I will. But the role of the store is certainly, it's always changing, but it's certainly changed during this pandemic.
Well, and off mic, you and I were talking about catching up and just talking about what may be the longest running impact of the COVID era, depending on how long it lasts, is this shift to home versus office, and the millions of people are going to spend less time in offices, which also means, a reconfiguration of retail. And I see it in your numbers here, 600 times more search interest in near me in 2020 than 2011. I mean, that's not an overnight thing, but it is, to me, very, very fascinating. I mean, I'd love to have you back on of course, anytime, but as we kind of continue this journey over the months and years around where and how people, live their lives different than they did before.
Yeah, I think, you brought up the home. It's such an important component of this pandemic where it's the fourth trend. It's a good segue, but we're all, quote unquote, home for the holidays. So that is literally, so that is changing the things that we buy during the pandemic. So I think in the early days, we can all think back to March or April, everyone's looking for comfy pants and a chair, desk for my home office. And in the summer, it was about patio furniture and other items for the home as the weather warmed up. And so as we head into fall, right, we're seeing a lot of interest in patio heaters, which, are impossible to find right now, air filters, but anything to do with the home is trending and at record levels in terms of search queries, as are, what we're describing small luxuries. People want to feel good and treat themselves. So whether it's a new 4K TV, earrings, golf clubs, items that feel like small luxuries to just pass the time and make yourself feel better, are surging as well. As are gift cards. And I think this is a really interesting trend as we're home. And, it relates back to stores and shopping online and so many of these trends are interconnected, but a gift card, it's such an easy purchase. It's safe. You don't have to wait in line. It's easy to get to the recipient. So we're here too. We're seeing record level of interest in gift cards. We believe more than ever. It will be, a really important gift. And so how these trends apply to retailers, this is a good example where, we would tell a retailer, if you sell gift cards, make sure that link isn't at the bottom of your website. Bring it up to the top and make it more prominent. That's how a retailer takes some of these trends and action them to better service their customers. I
love the discussion about gift cards because they're already the collectively, so to speak, and singularly, they're already the number one SKU in retail. If you think of it that way, they're very common, but they're now, and of course, my advice, and I think this is pretty common, is make sure you can transact online with the gift cards that people get in their stocking.
That's right.
That's as you said, tying all these kind of trends together, that's a pretty important one.
Yeah. So, I've covered 4 e-commerce moment now, Canadians shopping earlier than ever, the changing role of the store, and then the implications of being home for the holidays. The last one we wanted to point out is that more than ever, Canadians are shopping with different brands and different retailers. So our research shows that about a third of Canadians have shopped with a retailer during the COVID period that they hadn't shopped at previously.
Wow. A third.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
And, I think back to my experience during this moment, especially early on, where the places I like to shop didn't have items in stock. We're not it wasn't a satisfactory customer experience in terms of delivery time. So I was more open-minded than ever shopping somewhere new. And so I think the message here for retailers, it's a consumer trend, but the implication for retailers twofold. One is that more than ever, there's an opportunity to introduce new shoppers to your stores and your brands, but also there's a retention play, right? Don't take the loyalty of your previous customers for granted, especially if you're having servicing issues.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I was going to sum it up similarly as risk and opportunity. And I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Roger Martin, global strategist, and he talked about habits as decaying assets on the balance sheet. In other words, all those things that consumers just used to do with you as habit has been broken in ways we haven't seen since, he said, the Second World War. In other words, this big circuit breaker of consumer behavior. You're highlighting that in such a big way. A third of people shop somewhere where they hadn't shopped before. I mean, that's again, risk and opportunity, right? I think come together.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When you think about, is there anything in this data that jumped out at you as surprising? I mean, it's so weird to talk about surprising these days. Like every day is a surprise.
Yeah.
But I see numbers like 600%, 3,000%, and it's hard to say, did anything surprise you? But we all know big numbers are happening, big changes. Anything jump out at you that you were like, wow, I thought it would be big, but I had no idea? Fill in the blank. Anything jump out?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts. I mean, I think, look, you and I have both been in this industry for a long time. I think we're seeing a change in how people shop, specifically shopping online, that I think, frankly, some of us never thought would happen in Canada. So I think the magnitude of the change has been surprising. And, I think historically, Canada has seen success and wide adoption in terms of e-commerce with books, electronics, apparel. It really is across the board. Like grocery is a great example here. I mean, it's not holiday specific, but just it's pandemic specific, where it accelerated a category where Canada was among the lowest in the world in terms of online grocery, whether delivered to your home or, curbside pickup. Large goods, it wasn't that long ago that people would never think about buying like a sofa or a bed online. And now that is commonplace. Luxury goods. I mean, I'm still surprised that people will buy, a $3,000 or $5,000 jacket online, sight unseen, from an image on their phone that's the size of a stamp. So just the magnitude of the change and just how broad it is, beyond the categories that I think normally have seen success and adoption in Canada. I think the other thing, the last thing I'll point out is, there really is no sign that this is slowing. So I'll go back to the home example. I think the retailers in the home space, your Canadian Tire, Home Depot, Lowe's, and HBC, many, many others. Spring was probably exceptional in terms of demand for their products, and they thought, well, we'll see what happens in summer. And then summer was strong. And then it's in the fall, and you've got to think, God, hasn't everyone bought everything they need for their home? Yet, everything to do with the home, even furniture, is at record levels of interest by Canadians. So there's no sign of it slowing. It's not the case that it's just spend that was pulled forward. I think that was a concern. So a consumer electronics example there was a lot of people were buying laptops for their kids when they were homeschooling in the spring. Yeah. Some electronics retailers were worried that, well, maybe that's spend that's being pulled forward from back to school in September. But sure enough, back to school was pretty strong as well.
I guess the corresponding question for you or someone else in your team is the decrease in search for travel. And I've been...
that's a very important point you bring up.
We've been talking about, listen, there's a lot of... I've been making this point since the summer, and it's starting to look the case is that there's a lot of money on the table that is not being spent on even travel, but, restaurants and dining, unfortunately for our friends in the restaurant and dining business. But, there's a lot of, take a trip, it's $10,000 to take a trip with you and your family, and you're not doing that today. That's a lot of... that's a lot of money at play, so to speak, and not to be crass about it, but, that's a lot of money that is not being spent where it was being spent this time last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. Look, those are trends that don't impact all Canadians and all retailers equally, because there are many who this has obviously been very, very bad, for their jobs and their income and their livelihood. But Yes, for those who traveled, right? For those who ate at restaurants, that disposable income we're seeing is being shifted to other places. People have those people have the money to spend. And honestly, I think just boredom drives some of this as well. People want something to do. Shopping is an experience. You want to make yourself feel good and do something different. It's amazing how many people have moved, like bought or sold a home or a condo during this period, driven by like just lifestyle changes. Yes, but I think also like just wanting to do something.
Let me last question. Let me transition from looking at what consumers are doing with Google and what you mentioned a great roster of retailers that you talk to at the very senior level on an ongoing basis. What are the couple of things you're hearing from them about you and your products and their search and their concerns and their opportunities, as they look, as you said, between YouTube and Google, it's hard to find another place where people are starting that conversation. That's not new, but what are you hearing that is new as these retailers kind of figure this out and look forward to 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think similar to e-commerce, it's not conversations that are new, but I think they've accelerated out of necessity. So I think the first thing is, we hear a lot about the human side of this pandemic, and so executives are very, very busy and mindful of the stress that all of this has placed on their team, their staff. Whether it's in head office or in store. How do we manage a Black Friday that could be online only, or when our team is working remotely? There's a profound...
The super peak. I had one executive describe it the super peak. We talk about peak.
Yeah.
It's the super peak, or what they're calling in the U.S. Shipageddon.
Yeah. And so, yes, I heard someone say October's the 2020 of 2020, which is kind of funny, but... so I think there's a human side of this that I think all of us can relate to. Look, this affects different retailers differently, and I think retailers who were distressed, this creates more stress on the business, especially if stores are not performing and if they had underinvested in their digital channels historically. This makes it worse. But there are many retailers, I think, who made the right investments in terms of capital, in terms of skills, always, leaned into the digital acceleration. And frankly, this is a moment to win share. And so they see it as an opportunity to delight customers, win back customers, and win share from their competitors. So we're hearing that. I think increasingly providing like a differentiated customer experience, I think, is top of mind, driven by all of the changes around data and other things. But like, how do we do something different with our best customers or all of these new customers who have never shopped with us before?
Yeah.
Like, how do we provide a differentiated experience so they come back? So we hear a lot on the personalization front, both online and in store, really end to end. There's a lot of talk of the risks. You touched on a biggie, which is delivery. Canada Post, UPS, and others. Canada Post reported in April that the number of packages flying around is at like Black Friday levels. This is a concern, and many retailers have tried to get in front of it by managing expectations with estimated shipping time on the top of the site. Many will probably front load their holiday deals to try and quote unquote flatten the curve and get more sales earlier, so they can spread out shipping and are more likely to be able to deliver. But this is a big risk, I think, not being able to capture all of the demand that they have. And
back to one of your insights, I've described BOPIS, buy online, pick up at store, curbside, or whatever, as a safety valve of sorts. In other words, if the packaging system is trying to react like everybody else,
absolutely
use your best asset if you can, and just have people come pick it up, because consumers seem, and you're echoing this or reflecting this in your data. Consumers are interested in doing it. Like, you're not trying to push water uphill. They say, fine, I'll go do this. So just figure out this safety valve idea around it.
Yeah, and I think the retailers that who will be most successful are the ones who are able to provide the right experiences to the right customers based on their preferences. If I want to pick up curbside, make that available. If I want to buy online, make that available. If I want service, make it easy for me to book an appointment so I can speak to one of your associates and not wait in line and not deal with that. If I want to research online, but but pick up in store, make sure that I can see what inventory you have in stock and that it is actually in stock. So I think if you can delight customers across all of the different ways that they want to shop, you're more likely to succeed and benefit from, this moment.
Well, it's such an interesting time, and I couldn't think of anyone better to have this conversation with. You and I have known each other for many years and have many great conversations like this. You come with great data, and just, it's been such a treat just listening to you and talking this through, and we'll have to do it again once we see the what happens after holiday. But for the time being, thanks, Eric, so much for coming on to the Voice of Retail, sharing your data again for the listeners. I'll put a link into the data itself in the show notes, so you can kind of go in and see what Google is sharing. And as I said, the zeitgeist of all of us. So listen, stay safe. Have a great holiday period. I'm sure you're super busy with all the clients.
Yeah, we all are. It was great hearing you again, and I hope to see you soon as well. So thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks to Trinh, Larry, Jane, and Eric for being my guests on this episode. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Rate and review, please, please, please. And be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of LeBlanc Company Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.